everybody. How's it going? Dan Schinder here.
And Steven Schinder here.
And a bit of Fly to the Morglade from Olias of Sunhillow playing, which is our feature here on Yesshift.
Yeah, this version is from the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1979, apparently. Like, they had Anderson, Howe, and Wakeman there, so it's, I guess, kind of like ARW, but without the R plus the H or something. I don't know.
So it's kind of vintage at this point. The album had only been out a short time when they did this, which is cool. So it's very topical and relevant at the time. Not that he couldn't pull this out now and it'd be a buried gem, but it's cool that they did this way back then.
Yeah. So I guess we should begin with the context of this album. But first, before I forget, I just want to give a quick shout out. So I got a message from Tim Lutterby and one from John Vehadia about how the website, the new yesfans.com, now has the original Yes Fans URL attached to it. So it's www.yesfans.com. So yeah, I think that's nice. They couldn't carry over some of the older stuff, but that simpler, more familiar URL is nice to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Olias of Sunhillow. So this was something that was brewing for quite a bit for Jon. And I listened to the interview he did with Alison Steele back in 76 and the old Grey Whistle Test thing. And evidently, Roger Dean's artwork on Fragile was an inspiration. And Jon had also read some works by Vera Stanley Alder, and there might be some Tolkien influences as well. And Jon says there was a saint named Elias. I don't know if he meant like literally with the letter O or with an E, but
or his mushroom dealer.
I mean, it's funny that, well, we'll get to that, but basically he says that he had like a story and he was like, I'm not sure if I can write that, but then he took his family to Greece and woke up one morning and heard the buzzing of bees and watched the sunrise for 2 hours and then started writing the story of Olias of Sunhillow. And this, let me just pull this up real quick.
And folks, chime in and give us your thoughts to the questions Steve and I ask each other and the points we talk about with this fantastic album. We think it's fantastic anyways. We don't discuss this stuff a lot before the show whatsoever. So sometimes we surprise each other with each other's answers, and we want to know your thoughts also.
Yeah, it's somewhat fantastic, I would say. No, just kidding. I love this album. But yeah, so this quote is actually from the Yes Years video, and it was brought to my attention again thanks to another musician named Peter de Amor, who incidentally recently re-released a track of his called Flying Part 2 from his indie album The Line. And on that track, he actually had Billy Sherwood play on drums. Like, it was a remix of a track he did, I guess, and he had Billy play on it. So that's really cool. And I'll link that in the comments and in the podcast description when I have a moment. But so the quote from Yes Years is, I actually got a lot of this is Jon, by the way. I actually got a lot of equipment, keyboards, 24-track recorder, drums, percussion, put it in my garage and locked myself away for 6 months. Nearly went mad. I'm very proud of that album. And I also found this quote from Martin Popoff's book, Time and a Word. So I'm not sure if this quote was from around the time that book came out a few years ago, or if it was an old quote he dug up. But it basically, according to that book, Jon also says, in general, there's no way you can get to the truth about life through drugs or magic, things like that. It's within you. Which was kind of a funny quote to come across, because we kind of joke about, like, what was Jon on? And whatever. But whatever the case, we've also talked about how, uh, like on our show, how like Roger Dean was asked if he, or John tried asking Roger Dean if he could do the art for Olias of Sunhillow, but someone at Roger's office while he was away kept hanging up somehow. I don't know if there was like difficulty with like the phone machinery or something.
Oh, wow.
But
so he finally said, screw it.
I guess he got David Fairbrother Rowe to do the art, which I'm honestly glad that that ended up being the case, because it somehow suits John more, like the yellow lettering. I actually have my copy of the CD here,
and not just the yellow lettering, but I appreciate it too. Like Steve and I are both huge Roger Dean fans, huge. But the individuality of the solo album and having a different artist really kind of stepped John away even further from Yes. But not only that, because Roger's done album covers for Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, and so on, and others, and they do look different than Yes covers, but really more so with this cover, Olias of Sunhillow, it truly has its totally own personality that really embodies the music of this as much as Roger's artwork has embodied the music of Yes. Very interesting that two artists, graphic artists, painters, could create something that centric to the same musician, but in two different settings. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and this copy that I have, this is the 2006 re-release from Wounded Bird. And like the sole reason that I got it a few years ago was just so John could sign it at the 1000 Hands show that I went to in San Diego. So I got him to sign it. But what's kind of depressing is like in this particular version, the inside is like the artwork is very shrunken down and it's on just 2 pages.
I was in the pool.
Oh. Yeah, so I don't know if they fixed that for the like re-release last year, but yeah, it's I would not be able to read this. So for that reason, I'm sure the vinyl was very ideal. Like, okay, so for me, my intro to this album was again back in 2008 when I was getting into like the Yes solo stuff and other prog rock stuff. But what was it like for you when you first got into this album?
So it came out. I got it when it came out. I still have the LP. I don't know why I didn't pull it out. Probably because it's back there in a cabinet and would have taken some time, but I have it. And the artwork.
So you got it in 76?
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I got it in 78. I got it in 78. I got it 2 years after it came out. And it just took me away. It took me away as much as Close to the Edge and Tales took me away. It was that kind of album for me. You know, just you're in the story and the story takes you away. And the artwork is certainly part of that. The packaging of the LP at the time was certainly part of that. And as Steve showed us, it doesn't translate nearly the same way after being in the pool. I mean, being shrunken down, you know, like that. It just doesn't do it justice. They did a great job with the design and the actual artwork. And of course, we haven't even gotten to the music yet, but here was Jon. Here was Jon Anderson, the voice of Yes, the persona of Yes. And now he was doing something, he had done something outside of Yes. And the curiosity was just, you know, mind-bending. And then to see that album cover, whoa, it all just fell into place and fit. And I still love the album and the music.
Yeah, like you mentioned Topographic Oceans. And for me, my big three when it comes to like really high up there spacey prog albums is like Olias, Topographic Oceans, and the Anderson Stolt album Invention of Knowledge. Like those are my like holy
The Trinity,
if you will.
yeah,
Yeah.
of Prague.
Yeah, so this came out in July 24th, 1976. And basically, John performed everything, it looks like. And there are like some names listed for the production or like engineering and mastering and stuff. But in terms of the instruments, he played everything.
And
And it's just,
that's very impressive considering, and John, if you're watching or listening, I know you know we say this with love and with all due respect, but it's very impressive considering he's playing a lot of instruments he didn't know how to play, if that makes sense. Instruments that he wasn't really schooled on and all of that, and does a magnificent job. I think my favorite song, if I could I put that out there yet, or do you not want to go there yet?
yeah, we could go there.
Okay. It's the one I can't pronounce. The quack quack.
Oh, I know how to pronounce it. It's Coquake and Transic.
Thank you. That's a tongue twister and brain twister. That might be my favorite song. One of the reasons is I love his blend of all the different stringed instruments and the sort of percussion ensemble that's going with it. And I believe that all those different stringed instruments may have been influenced, and this is always one of our questions when it comes to Yes solo albums, and we're covering the first solo album by Yes member that was put out after they had joined Yes. What was the influence by Yes, if any, or vice versa? And I hear so much influence by Steve Howe. Not that he's playing like Steve Howe, of course, but the fact that Steve brought with him this arsenal and this skill set of so many different odd stringed instruments, not just the obvious one, 6-string, 12-string acoustic guitar, mandolin, mandola, but the Valchalia, the lap steel guitar, all these weird instruments. And I hear a lot of that influence in this texturally and musically, and I love it. I think that might be my favorite song on the whole album.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and list these tracks very quickly and then say what my favorites are.
Okay.
So we got Ocean Song, and some of these are like grouped next to each other with like a slash, because like it's multiple songs on the same track. So we got Meeting, also known as Garden of Jeddah, Sound Up the Galleon, Dance of Ranyart, Olias, To Build the Morglade, Coquake and Transic, Neon, Transictol, I think that's how it's pronounced, Flight of the Morglade, Solid Space, Moon Raw, Chords, Song of Search, and To the Runner. And this is a very well-rounded concept album all around, I'll just say right off the bat. And it's about, there's this volcano that's breaking the world apart, and there are these 4 tribes. And so these 3 magicians, as John has described them, Elias, Ranyart, and Coquake, are trying to like unite these tribes and use this Morglade, which is built from fish, from what I gathered from the lyrics. And then I read elsewhere that like fish and trees sacrifice themselves to like build the Morglade, which is really wild to think about.
I was close because I always thought it was fish sticks.
Yeah, I mean, this really does look like a fish out of water, so to speak. And yeah, and I also have like a pun in mind. I might as well get out of the way. It's July, and we're talking about Olias of Sunhillow. So Julius of Sunhillow. Okay, got that out of the way. But my favorite track might actually surprise you because it's instrumental and doesn't have John singing.
Which one?
It's Song of Search, so like the second to last song. It's very, to me, on its own, it sounds kind of melancholic and like thinking about life and how things,
it's contemplative.
Things sometimes end, and then with To the Runner, it feels like a new beginning type of thing. I've even written lyrics of my own while listening to Song of Search, kind of set to its tune, inspired by it. And yeah, I just love that song. But
I've also liked Moon Raw a lot. I mean, I like all of them. We're talking about some that we really put up there. I've always liked Moon Raw as well. And of course, Flight of the Morglade is kind of like it's
a staple.
Yeah, absolutely. If
Yeah, I
there were
love
to be a title
Flight.
track, that would be it.
Yeah, I love Flight of the Morglade, and To the Runner is kind of a reprise of Flight of the Morglade, I guess. And there's some really great lyrics on Sound Out the Galleon. Like the words on there, the way that I feel like there's some words on there where John turns a noun into a verb and it just works because of how musical it sounds like when he strings them together. And it's just amazing how that works.
You know, one of the other things I noticed about this, because I've been listening to it lately, is if you listen to the way he recorded his voice and how it was engineered and the sound of his voice, it to me reminds me so much of the way his voices sound on We Have Heaven. And
Yeah.
I find that interesting because of the glider and Morglade relationship and the earth splitting from a volcano. And then you've got that song from Fragile and his voice being so similar. I wonder if all that was conscious or unconscious or subconscious or just coincidence. But his voice is so much like that album, specifically that song. Did you pick up on any of that?
Yeah, I actually remember before going into Olias of Sunhillow when I was in middle school, like the way I read it described was basically it's like We Have Heaven, but expanded. So, I mean, should we just go ahead and hit the question of how did working with Yes influence this?
Yeah.
Since it feels like we're already touching on that.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So I was gonna say I do think Fragile was a huge part of it. You know, you got Roger Dean's artwork, which had to have planted this seed. And I mean, he was gonna get Roger Dean to do this, so there you go. And We Have Heaven feels very much like when John wanted to do this album, he wanted to do more of that. So I feel like it was very much he wants to do more of a specific Yes song that was all him rather than like something that he did with like all of Yes. And I don't know if you picked up on this, but this time around I was thinking maybe Ocean Song, you know, the opening song where it's kind of slow, kind of building up. It kind of gave me the same vibes as the added intro to the 2003 re-release of Revealing Science of God that had to be cut originally. So
yeah,
that
I did pick up on that.
Yeah, I feel like that may have possibly been a case where John might have been like, well, recut that. I want to do something like that again and keep it on this album.
And even named it to kind of coincide with the theme.
Yeah. Because
go ahead. Then I want to ask you something about the art.
Yeah, I was going to say the song naming makes me imagine there's a lot of water on the, like it's by a seashore, like where these people live. That's kind of why I imagine thanks to the song names. But yeah, go ahead.
So had he gotten had they opened the lines and put the call through, had he gotten Roger to do the artwork, do you think he would have said, hey, can I use that glider? Or would that have made it too Yes? Would he have realized that? Would Roger have said something? Or would he have said to Roger, can you make me a different glider? Like, it's just odd that there's also a glider, and it would have been more odd if it was Roger that did it, having done what he'd done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I feel like the glider that he went with David Fairbrother Rowe feels different enough, like not just because of the art style, but also because of the colors of it. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe if he had gotten Roger, he would have been fine with using the same exact glider.
But could he have? Isn't that part of a Roger Dean trademark or the Yes trademark?
It could be, but I feel like if Roger owns it and he works on Olias, then maybe it would have been fine.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure the record company would have been cool with it too, because, you know, they would have wanted something that makes people think, oh, we love Yes, so let's get this album that looks like it has something Yes-ish on it.
Tie it together. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do love the direction that he actually did go with it. And I feel like much of this iconography felt it became part of Jon's identity. I mean, we have like this circle with a square and triangle, and he's
Right.
like had that on stage during the Union tour and other things. And yeah, it feels very Jon. But do you think that if Roger Dean had done the artwork, it would have changed how we perceive the music and the story of this?
That's so hard to say because I can't imagine something visually to be more fitting. And it's easy to say that, being that this is the only visual representation we have.
Right.
But it's just so fitting. I just can't see it any other way. You know, like I can't picture Jon with a white afro.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And like, what do you think is the deepest, if at all, factor that relates to being in Yes influenced the sound of this?
I feel like I don't know if the Yes sound and approach influenced this, but I do think Jon's position in Yes and how he grew and wanted to grow further influenced it. Because I do vaguely remember there was a quote from Eddie Offord where he talked about how some of the guys in the band would kind of tease him a little. And, you know, in the early 70s, where, you know, like on Yes songs, they're used to seeing Jon mostly like have a tambourine. But as the 70s progressed, like mid 70s onward, he'd use an acoustic guitar every now and then. And so I kind of feel like he really wanted to grow and sort of prove himself, show that he can do a lot more than what I guess people thought he could do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. And that really blossomed on this.
Yeah, and funny enough, apparently, like after this album came out, there's like this really funny anecdote pertaining to Vangelis. Let me just pull it up real quick. So after Olias of Sunhillow came out, like management from the record company that Vangelis was with, they said that they weren't happy that he played on Olias of Sunhillow without telling them, and he was like, well, I didn't perform on this. And there's this quote that was from an interview with him that got translated to English, where he said, I myself was very surprised it had my name on the thank you list. Maybe I have influenced Jon, I don't know. And it's clear that it's closer to this than you get with Yes, but maybe it's a coincidence. In any case, it's a formidable feat. There is such a record when it features like Jon, a debutante on keyboards. I'm not really sure what that means. I believe the record represents more the way he is than what he does with Yes, no offense intended. Anderson is not an instrumentalist in the old sense of the term, and yet he has made, with lots of effort, a marvelous record. And
It's pretty well put, actually.
yeah, and I do think this does sound somewhat reminiscent of some of Vangelis's work. While we're on this sort of tangent, I just want to bring up that John Beagley and Robin Shell's cover of the Jon and Vangelis song Horizon.
That's right.
Is up on Facebook now over at John Beagley Music. And yeah, so you and I have both listened to this cover. Dad, what did you think of it?
Oh,
and then I'll
they
give my thoughts.
totally shredded it. No, it's brilliant.
Well, I mean, shredded could mean like
That's
a
true.
positive thing in rock, but
That's
yeah.
true. It's brilliant. It sounds great. The music and the vocals. Wow, it really lives up. It's a great tribute. How about you?
Yeah, it sounds, because John Beagley had been posting about how he was trying to figure out how to get it like really close to the music, and it sounds like if I had listened to it without knowing what it was, I think I would have thought it was the same exact track by Jon and Vangelis. But then when Robin starts singing, I might have been thinking for like a couple minutes that maybe something was different about my volume or something, and then eventually figure out, oh, it's a different singer. He definitely sounds a bit more different in the second half of the song, but it's still like it's a great tribute and a really nice thing that they put together in light of Vangelis's recent passing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great tribute. Where I stand with the influence of Yes on this album, some of it's the same as what you said, but I'll put it in a little bit different words.
Yeah.
The part where Jon did grow, and I think had he not been in Yes, I don't think he would have been able to acquire all that stuff and lock himself up and know how to use it. I think living in the studio, recording all those Yes albums and watching Eddie Alford and, you know, all these, I think that gave him the skill sets to work his way through it. So more than just musically was he influenced by being in Yes, but just being able to use the gear and all of that. And then I think of, so what came out right after this with Yes, and you have Going for the One, which we're going to be featuring on the 11th. We're going to talk about that album. And I kind of hear how possibly Wondrous Stories may have oozed out of this experience a little bit for him, because a lot of the album for me, if you boil it all down to the gold flakes, it's folk music. And if you look at it that way, progressive, of course, and it's got the Tolkien elements and these other things that Steve mentioned in the opening. And then you listen to Wondrous Stories and how beautifully organic and kind of folksy that is. I hear that being a thread from what happened before Elias, through Elias, to Wondrous Stories, and maybe even turn of the century.
Yeah, I think I also hear seeds of Awaken in this, because there are moments where it sounds kind of tribal, for lack of a better word, and Awaken definitely has those types of moments, I feel.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's a great album. Folks, let us know what you think. If you're watching on Facebook, whether it's live or the archive, chime in the comments. Let us know what you think of Olias of Sunhillow. If you're a Yes fan, if you're a Jon Anderson fan, and somehow, for whatever crazy alternate universe reason, you're not familiar with this album, get it. It's great. And if you could find the vinyl, even if you don't have anything to play the vinyl on, get the CD to listen to it on. Get the vinyl for the packaging that we talked about earlier. It's really great. I remember even the texture of the paper and the print wasn't just like, you know?
Yeah, I love how the cover looks like it's an ancient book, like an ancient text type of thing.
Yeah, like it's embossed leather or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the old Grey Whistle Test interview, and that's where they played this stop motion video set to the song Flight of the Morglade, or maybe putting the song over that video. But yeah, what were your reactions to that video?
As soon as I saw it, I had kind of a flashback, like, oh my God, I remember this. And I haven't had time today. I want to show Enja because she's a huge, old movie buff, like way back to before talkies, the silent films. And I want to see if she recognizes it and see what it's from.
Yeah, because it's a really odd choice. It's different from other promo videos for these Yes solo albums in that it doesn't feature the artist within the video. And not only that, but what's going on in the video, like it's black and white, stop motion. It shows, to me, it looked like it was a knight who goes to slay a dragon and then rescue the princess type of thing. And in my head, I'm thinking, what does this have to do with Olias of Sunhillow?
And because of that disconnect, it would have been great, fast forward many years, for him to have used that video for a promotion of the album Animation.
Oh, like the 1982 soul album?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because at least it's animated to a degree. I mean, there's some connection.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, the first time I watched this video back in 2008, I must have not been paying enough attention, or maybe the quality of the version I saw wasn't that great. But for the longest time, I remember thinking that this video was 2D animation that was somehow in black and white for some
Oh,
reason.
wow.
But yeah, no, it's stop motion, and it's like I kind of wonder like if this was maybe some sort of public domain thing that they dug up and just slapped the music onto, or if
Yeah, I
they
don't know. Let's
or
get
if,
Jon on and ask him.
yeah, I'd love to ask him about that.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's very intricate too.
yeah, because fast forward to a couple of years ago, and on his YouTube channel, he re-uploaded this interview, but omits that particular stop motion video, and instead places like this, like 3D computer animation. That's kind of what you would expect from his YouTube channel. It's got like asteroids and a ship that looks kind of generic. Doesn't look like the Morglade really. But I guess thematically feels more like the story in that sense because, you know, it's space and stuff. So I kind of wonder if maybe that was a rights thing or if it was maybe Jon thinking maybe he was not that happy with that
Just update
original video. Yeah, you know.
it. Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
where does this album rank for you? I know this is a difficult question. As I'm asking it, I'm thinking, why? I don't want to answer this, but I'm going to ask Steve anyways. Where does this rank for you for Yes member solo albums?
It's got to be my favorite of all of them. It's the one
Really?
I've listened to the most, like not just out of Yes member solo albums, but of any solo albums.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so yeah, it's my number one solo album for me, I think. And to be fair, listening to Story of I recently sort of challenged that, but at the end of the
Really?
day, yeah, but at the end of the day, you know, even before re-listening to Olias of Sunhillow, I already had the songs stuck in my head because I knew them so well and just already knew them before re-listening to it for this.
Hey, you have a Chihuahua, right?
Yeah, I do.
What's his name?
His name is Elias.
This
Yeah,
album has meant a lot to you.
yeah, he's a brown Chihuahua. And funny enough, one of the comments that we got like so many comments, so I had to like trim it down to just several. But one of them was from someone named Debbie Gentry Thompson, who said, "Love this album so much I named my dog Elias," and she also had some sort of brown dog, and it's just
Wow.
really funny.
Are you guys related? Wait, I guess I would know that. And how old's Elias? 15, 17?
He will he'll be 14 in September.
Wow. And there's a couple comments here from people watching on.
Yeah, I see them.
On the yeah, you check Trump Talk TV on the Yesshift page. I see Jason Dole says, I think it's great people are discussing Olias of Sunhillow. Well, I don't know if people are, but we are. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. That's cool though. Good point on the Awaken connection. There's lots of looping, rhythmic, and organic chants. Yeah, that's true. And that's where I got some of We Have Heaven from, as well as the actual mix and sound of Jon's voice. And then Christina Bourbano Jeffrey, hey Christina, says, I loved this album for years. Thanks for putting it on the show today. Awesome. Thank you so much for following. It's a beautiful album. And it here's the thing. If Jon Anderson was not in Yes, and this album just came out of nowhere as an unknown artist, it'd be at least as freaking brilliant. It's kind of less brilliant knowing that it's from Jon Anderson. He had been in Yes for X amount of years now, so you have this high expectation already. And it's great. It's still brilliant. But had it come from an unknown Jon Anderson with no pedigree of any, acumen in the music industry that we knew about, it'd be like, holy crap, what is this? And I hear a lot of music that's absolutely worthy of motion picture soundtrack type music. And, again, I'd love to see this as another album. I'd love to see a film made of, or animation or something telling the story, because it's a beautiful, beautiful story and a beautifully told story musically.
Yeah, that hits on the next thing I was going to ask. But first, since you brought it up, I think, well, if Jon was an unknown and he came out with this album, would this have gotten as much attention, like enough attention for it to be successful?
Well, that's a great question, and in two ways. Number one, would he have even gotten signed? Let's say yes, because it
yes,
because it was 1976. So if we put it in the context of the time to answer that question, I would say yes. Prague was still so alive. I mean, he's on the heels of having just put out and toured probably one of the most esoteric prog albums by a somewhat commercially known band, yes, and with Relayer. So compared to Relayer, it's pretty tame. So I think, would it have gotten as much attention? That's really hard to say, but I believe it would have gotten radio play and it would have gotten attention. Yeah, I hope that didn't sound like a political answer that made no sense.
Well, I think one thing that was a bit of something to consider is, would Relayer even have been a thing without Jon? Or, because like, I know he's not all of Yes, but how different would Relayer have been without him? Would it still have been esoteric because they still had Patrick and okay?
Yeah, musically, it could be, honestly, oh God, this will sound horrible, but I'm going to say it. Had the music been sung by someone else in Japanese or Portuguese with the same syllables and the same notes and not having a clue what the story was, I think it still would have been revered as a holy crap album. Okay. You may still have been able to discern from Gates of Delirium that it's a story about war and, all that, because musically it's told very well that way. But To Be Over still would have been an absolutely beautiful song, and Sound Chaser would have made musos want to literally chase that sound and be able to play it. I'm not saying the vocals don't matter or Jon doesn't matter. I'm just saying there's that side of it where musically it stands on its own.
Well, another thing is that
there's no nice way to say that, I guess.
Well,
but
the concepts for Close to the Edge, Topographic Oceans, and Relayer came about because of stuff that Jon read. So I feel like the path for Yes would have been different, and those albums might not have been as esoteric. Like, they might not have ended up as they were, but there were still other prog rock bands around this time who were doing some weird stuff. So maybe the Olias of Sunhillow still would have fit in that sort of scene.
And I think part of what would have helped it to be commercially accepted is that whole folksy sort of side of it. Sort of
like Jethro Tull.
I was just going to say that. It's sort of like a cross between what Jethro Tull was doing at the time with the Renaissance / Baroque sort of soundscape to their music, with what Yes ended up doing with Wondrous Stories and Turn of the Century and, Magical and that sort of thing. It slots right in there, probably by no coincidence. It makes me want to listen to the heck out of it over and over and over and really absorb it in, which I still have it right here, ready to go.
Yeah, but getting back to the film aspect that you brought up, something I forgot to mention on the Story of I episode is that about 20 years ago, Patrick said he'd love for Story of I to get adapted into like a movie, whether it be live action or 3D animation or 2D animation. And so my question to you is, could either that or Olias of Sunhillow be adapted to the screen, and in what medium or style do you think either of those would work best in?
So I'm going to start with Olias, and I can see it in two ways. I could see it live action in the vein of how the Lord of the Rings story unfolded. but maybe even more so with the folks at Henson with the Dark Crystal and that sort of thing. I think that would, you'd really be able to bring that album cover to life and the whole persona of all that and the more Glade. And I think that would really be cool.
Yeah.
With Patrick, I see more of a 3D animation thing, I believe.
Okay.
How about you with either of those?
Well, for Patrick's album, it's hard for me to discern what could work best. If it were made today, live action might be able to work. You could make it sort of a surrealist film. And I don't know if they would have to pad the runtime with like more dialogue in between songs, or maybe more songs would have to be added. Like I'm not sure how that would
underscoring
work.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. For Jon's album, I do agree that doing it like the Dark Crystal would fit it pretty well. And I mean, both that story and Olias of Sunhillow involve, using music to get all this stuff done. And it's very mystical, and some of that iconography with like the triangles and stuff, like I could just see it, and I want more of that fantasy puppet, like live action
Muppet.
Well, yeah, well, it's still puppetry, but yeah, like I want to see more of that with, live action, but with no live action humans, like utilize puppetry to its fullest. And we need more of that. I could also imagine this, like if this had been made, if a movie or TV special of this had been made in like the late 70s, you could have had Rankin and Bass do it, like how they did the animated Hobbit movie from 77.
Yeah, that's true. Huh. That could work. But it just wouldn't. Yeah, if it came out then, it would make sense. I was going to say it wouldn't have had the depth and all that. But at the time, I got the Hobbit when it came out. The animated, you remember watching it as a little kid, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge like thing that made my personality. Yeah.
Steve actually lives under a tree on a hill. Oh, well, never mind. He's also about 6'1". I think today it would look dated, but back then it would have worked because that's how things were back then.
Yeah, which is why today I think the Jim Henson Company would be the best fit for it.
Yeah.
Whereas Story of I is kind of, it's hard to nail it down because I feel like it's a bit more abstract.
And futuristic, sort of, right?
Yeah, it's a bit more sci-fi, whereas this one, despite going into space, feels more fantasy.
And mystical.
Enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But adaptations of either of those, I would be very curious to see. I would just be wondering, like, how much would they have to add, like, dialogue-wise, and maybe add more songs and that type of stuff? And would it still be as effective,
What's the running time? Do you know the total running time of Elias?
About 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah. So you need to add at least another half hour for it to be... Well, 45 minutes could be a short film.
Right, yeah.
A long short film. But that'd be a Prague short film.
Yeah. So another thing I thought of, which I might need to explain, is what makes a solo album more of a solo album? Like, it is... How do I explain this? So does duplicating oneself so that they're performing everything make a solo album more of a solo album, or does having just one person perform one thing where it feels like it's just one voice, one instrumentalist throughout, make it feel like more of a solo album?
I'm going to give you two answers. One is they're both right, because sometimes a solo album means someone's in a band that they're a member of and they're known for, but they break away to do this project, so it's considered a solo album regardless of how much they do or don't play or sing on it. Whereas for my sensibilities, I more appreciate something like this, where in Jon's case he's playing everything, but where in other cases the person's playing at least most of the things, and they've written all the music, and it's their baby, their thing. Alan's, bless his heart, Ramshackle was much more a complete embellishment of your second example, where it just happens to be solo, as in not in Yes, the band he was, even though he had a couple of the members involved. That and this album we're talking about are two different ends of the spectrum. And do you want to address that comment by Nick? Because I know you said some of this already, but before you do, what's your answer to that? And is mine acceptable to you?
I mean, everything you said was fair. I don't know if I have an answer nailed down. It's just a thing I thought of, like, does having just one person and like nobody else, and they do one instrument, one voice, would that make it feel more like a solo album?
I think yes.
And okay.
And I also think if they have guests, let's say it's my solo album and I'm playing drums and percussion and that's it. And I'm in a band, I'm known for that band, and I do a solo album, but I'm playing just drums and percussion, but I wrote all the songs and I'm producing it. I think that's very much a solo album.
Okay, yeah, because
that's kind of middle ground there.
Yeah, because I was thinking, in any case, like, to me, this feels the most solo album out of these 5 Yes solo albums of this period, somehow, because I think because it's just Jon, even if he is performing everything, and it doesn't feel like it's just one person doing one thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's not just playing the harmonica through the whole album.
Right. But this comment from Nick Kokocious, Olias of Sunhillow was inspired by the book The Initiation of the World by Vera Stanley Alder, a British portrait artist and writer on Western occultism.
I call bullshit. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
She also advised Jon on concepts for the Tales from Topographic Oceans album. I think she even helped with writing in the liner notes. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Topographic Oceans. So yeah, thanks for that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool, Nick, to have you chime in and be so well versed in such literally a deep cut, that's a whole album. The album's a deep cut, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's just so out there.
Yeah. I wonder what percentage of Yes fans have ever even heard this.
Right. Well, speaking of percentages, how Yes is this album, would you say?
Ooh, you always ask this during these. I love this question.
Yeah.
So I have a question in order for me to answer in the right context.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask, I'm answering only in the context of up to that point, right? Not what came after, because I mentioned Wondrous Stories.
You could answer for both. Like, you could do up to this point or just all of Yes in general. Like, you could answer both ways.
Okay. I hear a lot of his imprint on Yes in this, rather than the other way around, even though I did make the Steve Howe reference with the influence of all the different stringed instruments. But I hear a huge imprint of this is what Jon Anderson's all about. And it's not just his voice, and it's not just the lyrics, and it's not just the melodies. It is all those things, but 100% his influence on it this time, rather than someone else saying, no, sing it this way, or, or him singing someone else's lyrics. And the whole musical soundscape and styling. So if you take this and slap it onto Yes music up to that point, and even, I guess, I say at least, it makes up for at least 30 to 50% of the classic Yes sound. Okay. And that might be more than anyone else I've ever cited.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, if it's just up to this point, I was thinking like maybe 30%, but perhaps no higher than that. Because, I mean, maybe it's because Story of I, listening to that recently, like, to me, it just felt a bit more like it's easier for me to imagine Story of I retrofitted into a Yes album than Olias of Sunhillow as a Yes album. But if I were to use the percentages for like all of Yes history, then I guess this might be a little bit lower, like maybe 20, 25, because like some of the later Yes stuff goes through like some of those changes where it's like not as esoteric as you said. So but it's still like here. I still hear some of those traces of Yes, definitely. Just
Yeah, and
not as much.
I hear things like I get up, I get down. That could have been on this album. I hear
Oh, the remembering.
totally hear that on this album. That totally would fit if that came in out of nowhere. Just little things like that. Just little things. Like, I think John had something to do with that now that I hear this, And some of it we know he did, but Leaves of Green.
Yeah, like yeah, because I mean, even parts of the ancient have like some like the way that the words are chanted, and like there's some carryover into this. I think like the way some things are chanted.
And We Have Heaven.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What we talked about and what Jason mentioned also agreed with us about Awaken. With you said the tribal stuff, the loop and looping, repeating rhythms. He's definitely had a little bit to do with the sound of Yes over the years.
Yeah, and like this was a huge first solo album for him to do. I don't think there was anything quite on this scale from him until Toltec, I would say.
And you know what? You make a great point that you mentioned earlier about him probably feeling like he had something to prove. He was known for having a tambourine once in a while, maracas. Once in a while he had an acoustic guitar. And then it wasn't till this album we knew he plays everything on it. He went from almost nothing to playing everything he could get his hands on.
Yeah.
I think that's extremely impressive. It's probably the most surprising solo album by a Yes member because of that. Imagine hearing it and not reading the liner notes and thinking like, who else is on this? No one. Wait, what? But who's playing? That's John. But what about that's John. What? Because we never saw that or heard it before.
Yeah, because I think one of the comments that I saw was like someone, I think today, thought that Patrick had performed on it with John, and then I told them, no, it's just John on all of it, and they're like, oh, I stand corrected. So it was a really funny thing.
But it's also a testament to how well he fooled everybody with some great musicianship on some instruments he was not very well versed. He just picked them up and played them, and and I say that with love. I'm not criticizing. Ian Anderson, same thing. He is a flautist to the highest degree of flouting. I learned only in the last maybe 3 years ago that all the stuff he had done on other stringed instruments, he was making shit up. He didn't know what chords he was playing. He was just getting the sounds from his head to his fingers. And that's what I've done over the years with those instruments. I forgot so much music theory that when I did recordings playing, and I'm looking at them, I have a 10-string guitar, an 8-string mandolin, a 6-string classical guitar. I never wrote out the music. I just taught my fingers to do what was in my head. And for him to do a whole album like that and for it to work, that's very impressive.
Yeah. I have like a couple more topics, but let's get through some of these comments first.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to read all of these that we have on the doc here, but Brian Levine describes it as such. He says, it's an event. Jon Anderson does Tolkien via Roger Dean. When you consider he played all the instruments, it's nothing short of phenomenal. And yeah, that's a very great way of describing it. Tolkien by way of Roger Dean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And John Kuhn says, absolutely incredible that Jon did this all by himself. A true solo album and extremely creative.
And here's an interesting one from Mark Jacobson.
Yeah.
He says, this was a challenging album for me, but since I like musical challenges, it was just fine. After several years, I fell in love with it, and it's always blown my mind that Jon Anderson played everything, just to our point, what we were talking about. Not bad for a singer, and Jon, of course, is known as a singer. Freddie Mercury was a singer, but he was a brilliant musician as well.
Yeah, he continues.
Anyway, I rank it number 2 amongst all solo albums by Yes members, only behind Chris Squire's Fish Out of Water. I'll have to check that out. I'm not familiar with it. Which I think is the greatest solo album by anyone ever. Kind of hard to beat that. But Olias of Sunhillow certainly takes the cake for most unique album ever. I mean, there is nothing else like it, even from Jon himself. Good point. Could make another album like this. All the stars were aligned for this masterpiece to be made, as it were. That's a great testimony for that album, especially going in with it apprehensively, it seemed like, Mark.
Yeah, and on a slightly different end, Hugh McGinnigal says, the writing of Yes collectively and individually was so prolific around that time with Fragile, Close to the Edge, and Tales, along with the solo albums. Of those solo albums, Jon takes top place over Chris's Fish Out of Water by virtue of the sheer complexity of the pieces and the fact that he played everything on it. I've often wondered if... Sorry, what?
I said everything in all caps.
Oh, yeah. He continues, I've often wondered if what Mike Oldfield did with Tubular Bells gave Jon the idea of doing everything himself.
Good point. That's a great point.
So yeah, that's an instance where Hugh prefers Olias over Fish Out of Water. But I did see a couple other people say they prefer Fish Out of Water despite liking Olias. So I think Fish Out of Water is probably, out of these 5 albums, the one that pleases the most types of fans, like both the more casual listeners who might go for commercial stuff and the prog heads who would listen to complex stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's probably the biggest crossover, easily crossed over album, if that makes sense. Steve Howe probably being second to that.
Yeah, and these next 2 comments that we actually have a couple images from them. So this one is from Doug Curran, who says, Jon's best solo album, a wonderful mix of music, story, and art in one package. A must for Jon fans. This is my Jon signed in 76 US album. And yeah, so he posted a comment of his copy of the album with Jon's signature.
And I didn't download that to show it.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Doug. And Tom Millman said, this is my favorite album of all time. Headphones, a darkened room, a nice buzz, and I'm right there. This is my original pressing that Jon signed accidentally twice at the 1000 Hands meet and greet. So yeah, he also had one where Jon signed it twice. It's kind of funny. And Dave Watkinson, who's been on our show a couple of times.
Who?
Dave Watkinson. He says, an album like no other. Jon is in genius mode, perfect music, story, and cover. I have the whole box of 50 items on Olias I used for the re-release. So yeah,
And it came out on his birthday, I happen to remember. Not Jon's birthday, Dave's.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it came out on his birthday 40 years ago, whenever, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Not 40 years ago, what am I saying? But when it came out on his birthday.
Okay.
His 40th birthday. Dave's like 98. Just kidding.
But yeah, going back to... yeah, we have this thing about the Yes Solos sampler, but do you want to touch on that solo sampler thing first, or these other 2 questions at first?
2 questions.
Okay. So from what you've heard of the live stuff, like, what do you think? Well, I guess I should preface this by, in terms of live play, and we haven't heard like all this, like both of us, but in terms of live play, Jon has done Flight of the Morgwade at least once on the Yes 1976 tour.
Right.
And like we mentioned, there's that 79 Montreux Jazz Festival. And he's also done Flight of the Morgwade acoustically in the early 2010s. And on the 1000 Hands tour, he's done. I remember at the show I went to, it had Ocean Song playing on the speakers while everyone was getting ready to perform, as a pre-show
Did
track.
that surprise you?
Yeah, it kind of did. It surprised me how much Olias there was in there. Like, I know Flight of the Morgwade was performed. It began with the violinist doing like a little bit, and that segued into that. And there was like something kind of missing that didn't make it sound as spacey as on the album, but there was some cool stuff. Like I could hear like the guy on like the hand drum, like, whenever Jon would be singing, it would be like in rhythm with that. So like at the slightest confrontation, it'd be like do, 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 that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think To the Runner was also played. And at the end of the show, when they did Starship Trooper, they segued the song into a bit of Solid Space at the end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it fit really nicely, just that transition. It was so good.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but what do you think of the little bit of what you've heard of, like what I sent you, like the intro music, I guess?
Yeah, we played a little bit of the intro. I'm going to open it up before I answer and play a little bit of it. And it might jump on the screen real quick, folks. I'll move it out of the way because the pictures have nothing to do with the music. Oh, it's not going to. So check this out. I'm just randomly going to just go right here.
And there they were inside the morgue to move but to chat with the forced to position. As rhythm raced inside the ship, give a life of a struck to the soul of perception.
We're going to play a bit of one more.
And raised
No one's ever heard that. I think to answer your question, I think it translates really well. I loved the piece of him just playing with the acoustic and singing. I think because of that folk element that I've been mentioning, that it translates really well that way. It's easy to play a stripped down version of some of this stuff and for it to work. I'd love to see him do a tour of just doing that album.
Yeah, I think over the last several years, he's been saying it'd be fun to do all of Olias of Sunhillow live, and clearly, like, the crowd loves hearing this stuff, the Jon Anderson fan, so it would be a huge hit if he did the whole album.
What's with his follow-up? Son of.
Yeah, so his follow-up, over the years, he's referred to it as the Songs of Zamran, son of Olias, and it might have gotten a shortened name over the last few years, like just Zamran or something, but he's been talking about this since, like, at least as far back as 1999. And back then he was saying he'd been working a couple of years or a few years on something like sort of like Olias, and every now and then he'll say in an interview that he's still working on it, and there are like little snippets that have trickled onto YouTube, like from this work in progress. But the way that he talks about it sounds like what the heck is this supposed to be? Because I remember there was a quote from him, and you can find lots of this info over on Bonde Gazoo, but at one point I remember he said something like, "Oh, Xamarin is going to be an app, and it'll take you on different pathways," and it's like, well, what is this supposed to be? Is it supposed to be like on shuffle, and it makes sense no matter what order you listen it to, or is it supposed to like, is it choose your own adventure type of thing? Like, how's this supposed to work?
Interesting. So what's your answer for how it sounds live and how it translates?
Oh, the Olias material, you mean? It sounds really great. I really want the full album to be performed.
Yeah.
But going back to Xamarin, it's like, I don't know like what the deal is. And I know with Olias of Sunhillow, Jon said that it was supposed to take 2 months and then became 5. So like, I'm wondering, is that same thing happening, but on a much longer amount of time? So I just found like this quote from like the March issue of Prague magazine, where apparently it describes Anderson as being close to finishing Xamarin, Son of Elias, and he's quoted as saying, "It will be in 4 movements lasting over 4 hours. The first and second movements are finished. They're 55 minutes and an hour. I was working on the third movement just yesterday. That's over an hour. Now I've just got to work out the story interwoven between the layers."
Wow. I'd love to see the film, see the concert, get the book set, the whole deal.
Yeah, I would love these albums adapt into graphic novels or prose novels. Like, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the other question?
So the other question... Oh, I think it was actually about Xamarin, like what the deal is with that. But
really? Okay.
Yeah, but I guess we can go to the Yes Solos LP sampler topic we have at the bottom.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, this was an LP that was given to like radio DJs so that they have like all these, I guess, singles from each of these 5 Yes solo albums. And I suppose it's not designed to be played beginning to end, but
right.
What I was kind of wondering is if it were designed that way as an album where it showcases 2 tracks from each of these 5 albums, is there anything you would swap out and swap in, I guess? I should mention that this has Flight of the Morglade, Hold Out Your Hand, Break Away From It All, Best Years of Our Lives, Spring Song of Innocence, sorry. Ooh Baby, Dancing Now, Lost Symphony, Lucky 7, and Meeting with Sound at the Galleon.
I'm looking at the list to answer that. First of all, I think Break Away From It All by Steve Howe needs to go either first or last. It's in the 3rd position. I love that song. It's so much energy, and that should probably be the last song, just like it is on his album, because the outro of it is great.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, to open, I'd say Hold Out Your Hand.
Ooh.
Yeah. Song of Innocence, I see in the middle, before or after Flight of the Morglade. And I see kind of Flight of the Morglade, Meeting, and then Alan's 2 songs in the order that they are there right after those. Song of Innocence and then Ooh Baby, Going to Pieces, as sort of the bridge of the album, if you will, and then kind of kick it back into gear with almost any order of what's left there, I think would work.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about swapping anything out. Some of the songs, like from Patrick's album, I don't remember all the title names and everything.
Right.
But there aren't any songs here I'd say that's got to go. You know, there's no All Good People for me on there.
Yeah, I do kind of like how this is bookended by 2 Jon Anderson songs, but I like the idea that you provided that it should begin with Hold Out Your Hand. I think that as much as I like Lucky Seven, I would swap that out so that we could have, uh, like, well, for one thing, I would put some of these back to back with their respective artists, so they wouldn't all be separate from each other. But if it begins with "Hold Out Your Hand," I would want it to be followed by "You by My Side" because I just like those two go hand in hand, pun intended.
I Okay, I love that song. I love hearing Chris sing with almost no other music with his voice. But to me, Hold Out Your Hand is an opening, bum, bum, da, 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 and then it just comes down with, that's the only thing. It would just bring it down, and then you gotta.
Well, I think they can make that work though. Like they could follow that with Spring, Song of Innocence, and then have that lead into Meeting, Sound at the Galleon, and then Fight of the Morguade ends side one, and then
You don't think it just cools off too soon though?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And then side two, I think I would swap out Ooh Baby for Avacak since that one is like really really trippy and just I prefer that over Ooh Baby.
That's true, yeah.
And then Dancing Now is a good song, but I think I would swap that out for Kashasa. And then I suppose then you would have
There's a lot of people that have never heard any of these songs.
Yeah, there's also that Patrick song, Best Years of Our Lives, which I guess I would put after Kashasa because you have to showcase that there are vocals on the album, I guess. And then go into Lost Symphony and Break Away from It All, I guess.
Fair. Cool. Folks, let us know what you think. If you're listening on the archive, go ahead and chime in with your comments. And you can also, if you don't want to look at us, you can always listen to our audio podcast versions at anchor.fm/Yesshift. And you can write us with ideas, suggestions, or just to say hey at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. And you can buy us a cup of coffee or an iced tea at, Stephen?
Yeah, just go to anchor.fm/Yesshift and click the support button. And yeah, you can listen to the audio on various apps, Apple and a bunch of other ones. But yeah, and you can also find these on the YouTube channel, which I'll link, of course. And again, you can catch us live here on facebook.com/Yesshift. And our next show will be on July 11th. It'll be our 1-year anniversary show, which we've titled Going for the 1-Year Anniversary. So we'll be talking about going for the one and sort of kind of through the lens of I'm sure we'll be gushing about what we love about that album, but we'll also be looking at it through the lens of how did working on solo albums in this period sort of influence
That's
that
my
album.
least favorite Yes album, but whatever. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, folks. I know it's the least favorite of other people, but not mine.
Right, and we'll also be sharing I guess we'll begin the show by sharing memories of the show, talking about things that we've enjoyed and surprising things. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I got all kinds of anecdotes for that album.
Yeah, we'll begin.
I was there when it came out.
Oh, but I meant we'll begin with trip through memory lane of our experience with Yesshift this past year.
Because it is our 1-year anniversary. Wow.
Yeah. And people can write to us or leave comments, and we might read something if you have any thoughts on that, or just on going for the one.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed anything that we've done, if you've enjoyed any of the interviews, we've had a few people on, Billy Sherwood, Bill Bruford, Mike Tiano, a few other Yes-related people.
Yeah, Oliver
Plan on
Wakeman.
having some others. Oliver Wakeman.
Adam Sears from Lobate Scar.
Adam Sears.
Yeah, You Have It All CD actually came in the mail for
That's
me.
awesome.
It's all signed. Yeah.
Nice.
From the Indiegogo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed any of that, chime in. Tell us what you've liked so we can do more of that. And thanks for following what we do. And we will see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Oh, let's have a little treat on the way out. How about that?